The message that I have this morning is here. It came out of our celebration of graduates in the next service. There'll be a lot more junior high kids and high school kids and graduates. But there's nothing in this message that's not appropriate for our age group either. While it came out of that graduation service, I believe there are truths in here that apply to each one of us. There's a book in the Bible. It's a very curious book. I looked, and it's 10 chapters long, and it's one story. And the word God is not mentioned in that book. Pretty unusual for 66 books in the Bible. It's the only one where there's no mention of God. Anybody know the name of that book? Esther. The book of Esther. And it tells one story about Queen Esther. And it's 10 chapters long. And I am not going to read it to you this morning. But it's all one story. So if you allow me to paraphrase, we can get right to the point a little quicker. The author of the book is not written by Esther. The author of the book is unknown. It happened about 450 years before Christ walked the earth. As Israel was coming back together, Israel was coming out of slavery in Persia, in Babylon, and then Persia, and King Darius was letting them return to Israel. But this story doesn't take place in Israel. It takes place in Persia, which is modern-day Iran, by the way. Some of you may know the story, some of you may not, but it is a true story. The king, 450 years before Christ, was a man by the name of Ahasuerus. That is his Hebrew name. He's known to us as Xerxes. Most of us have heard of Xerxes, the king of Persia. The capital was Shushan in those days. The king threw a great banquet, and princes and dignitaries of the realm came, his upper crust of society. This banquet lasted 6 months. How'd you like to put that one on, Terry? And there was, in the royal palace, this is a very, very wealthy country. It was a time for partying and drinking and making merry. And the law of the land was that no one was required to drink, but anybody that wanted to could. So much merriment was made. And the king, the book says, after the king had made his heart merry, I hope you all understand what that means. He had a merry heart. He asked for his queen, Vashti. She was having a banquet for the women. The king's banquet was men only. So she had a banquet for the women. And he sent for Queen Vashti, who was very beautiful. And he wanted her to come and entertain the men, to dance for them. And it's not expressly said, but the idea is maybe a lewd dance. What we might call a striptease. Because she was very beautiful. And this is a pagan country. And she refused. So he banished her from the kingdom. He divorced her and sent her into exile, never to see her again. And then the word went out through the empire, and a multitude of young virgins were brought to Shushan. They were bathed and dressed and perfumed and bejeweled for an entire year. And then they were presented to the king so he could pick a new wife from the most beautiful in his kingdom, which was not just Persia. He was the king over many, many nations. The Persian Empire. From all the most beautiful young ladies of the empire, the king selected the most beautiful, Esther. Unknown to the king, she was a Jew. The king had a chief counselor by the name of Haman. Haman was an evil man. He had a black heart. He was second only to the king in power and authority. What he said was the rule. He could condemn somebody to death by speaking it on the king's authority. He loved to parade through the streets of Shushan, and all the king's subjects were to bow before him. all except one man, Mordecai, Esther's uncle, who was also a Jew. Haman was going through the streets and everybody bowed. Mordecai did not. Haman stopped and commanded Mordecai to bow down directly. And Mordecai refused and replied to Haman, I bow down to no man but the Lord God Jehovah. This so infuriated Haman that he devised a plot and manipulated the king into signing a decree that was sent to all the provinces of the Persian Empire that on a certain day, it would happen to be 10 months away, but on a certain day, all the Jews in the kingdom would be executed. And he had a gallows built expressly for Haman, to hang him at the gallows for his impudence at not bowing to such an important man. The only problem was that there was somebody in the story by the name of Queen Esther. The king had remarried. Mordecai was her uncle, and he sent word to her, you need to go into the king and talk him out of this dastardly plan of killing all the Jews. And the rule in the kingdom, the rule in the palace was nobody entered the king's presence without him inviting them. And it wasn't just a courtesy, it was under penalty of death. If you walked into the throne room uninvited, you were walked out and executed. So Mordecai asked Esther, the king's husband, will you go in and beg for your people? And that was the problem. She knew no one could enter the king's presence without being summoned, even the queen, under penalty of death. I want to read you Esther's response. Out of all the 10 chapters, I think there's 4 verses that are important for us here today. Her reply to Mordecai through a intermediary or messenger. All the king's servants and people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman that goes into the inner court of the king, who has not been called, he has but one law, to put all to death. Except the one to whom the king holds out his golden scepter, they may live. Yet I myself have not been called into the king in 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words. Mordecai told them to answer Esther. Go back and tell her this. Do not think in your heart you will escape the king's palace any more than any other Jew. Remember, the king doesn't know she's a Jew yet. And then Mordecai goes on, for if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Who knows, but for such a time, Esther, as this, you were placed upon the earth. We don't know how old she was, probably in her mid-20s, maybe early 20s, but she had lived her whole life. And Mordecai says, who knows? But the whole reason you were born and grew up and brought here was for this purpose. Esther did go into the king under the threat of death. He lowered his golden scepter and pointed it at her. And she found favor with the king, and the order for the extermination of the Jews was canceled. Haman was hanged on the very gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. The question for this morning, for each one of us, wherever you're at in life, if you're still in your teens or your 20s or your 50s or your 80s, who knows, but for such a time as this, you were placed upon the earth. As I thought about what I might say today to the class of 2025 in the next hour, today's message came into focus. It flowed out from what I wanted to convey to this year's senior class, but it's also appropriate for all the classes, the underclassmen, and it's appropriate even for us. The first thing I want to tell the seniors is life is not fair. In this day and age of helicopter parents and Parents not wanting their kids to experience anything bad or get hurt. No, I don't want my little Johnny playing football. He might get hurt. Yeah, he might get hurt. But life isn't fair. We all know that. We've all lived long enough to know that. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to parents. It's not fair to anyone. Life is not fair. If it was fair, little babies wouldn't be born blind. Ask anyone who lost a job and a career during COVID-19. Ask anyone who's been diagnosed with cancer. Life is not fair. Ask the mother who lost a young child to illness. Ask a parent who lost a teenager to someone driving drunk. Ask a parent who lost a mom or dad far too soon. Life isn't fair. It's a fact of life. Sometimes unforeseen circumstances or tragedies will catch us unawares. Sometimes other people in your life will treat you unfairly. I imagine about everybody in this room has been cheated at one time or another. I know I have. Doesn't feel good. Sometimes people will be mean. They'll be manipulative. They'll cheat you. They'll talk ill of you. They'll take advantage of you. And none of us can control the unexpected circumstances in life, whether through other people or natural circumstances. None of us can control the unpreventable tragedies in life. Lightning strikes where it will. Wind blows where it will. None of us can control the actions of other people. We can't control how other people treat us. What we can control, however, is how we react to those people who treat us unfairly. How we respond and how we react are all under our direct control. Your response to any situation is your response. Mother Teresa was a Catholic nun who intentionally took a vow of poverty. She chose to go to India and spend the rest of her life in India ministering to the poor, the diseased, and the outcast. She was there for over 60 years. And late in life, not long before she died, she wrote these words. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you're successful, you will win some false friends and some true friends. Go ahead and succeed anyway. If you're honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build it anyway. You find serenity and happiness. They may be jealous, but you be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow, but do the good anyway. Give the world your best. You see, in the final analysis, it is solely between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. For 20 years over at retreat, I've told the young people pretty much the same thing. Other people can ruin your reputation. They can lie, they can gossip, they can make up stories, they can go on Twitter and Instagram and all the other things that a guy my age doesn't know about, and they can destroy your reputation. But no one can diminish your character. Your character is your line in the sand I will not cross. Your character is solely and completely under your control. What will you not compromise on? That's your character. Mother Teresa's words are not directed toward how we're treated in life. They're directed at how we respond to how we're treated. How you respond is a choice. It's your choice. And these young people, I'm going to look them in the eye and say, you're standing on a precipice, but each one of us is. All that's come before is past. We can't change it. We can't do anything about it. The only thing we have is today and what lies ahead. We have an empty book starting today, and we're writing the pages of our life with our life. Your future is an open book. Do the words that you write on the pages of your life, do they match how you live? Your life will be the result of decisions that you make. You cannot go through life blaming other people for failures and hurts. Sometimes things happen beyond our control. But 99% of what happens to your life is some decision you made along the way. They call graduation commencement. I used to be confused by that because commencement means the beginning of something, the start of something. Well, these kids from preschool all the way through high school, they're graduating, and now a new stage of life is commencing. But folks, for every one of us, when we wake up in the morning, if God lets us see the morning sun, our life is commencing anew. What are you going to do with that day? Most people blame other people, their outside circumstances, for how their life turns out, when in fact it was based on, the majority of how it turns out is based on decisions that they made. Charlie Brown and Lucy, I saw a little cartoon, Lucy says, "You only live once." And Charlie Brown says, "No, you only die once, you live every day." How you live is your choice. And people will choose to live a sufficient life, many choose to live a successful life, and others choose to live a significant life. I've lived all three. In my earliest years, through junior high school and high school, most of my 20s, I was content to live a sufficient life. My motto was, that's good enough. It was sufficient. It was adequate. I wasn't pressing for anything better. I kept the bar pretty low. I found out if I kept it low, it was easy to reach. It's my secret strategy. Low expectations always yield simple results. The path of least resistance, a sufficient life. It doesn't take much effort. For example, this would sound egotistical. I'm a fairly intelligent guy. Like Sheldon said, I know because my mom had me tested. But my grades wouldn't reflect that. If you saw my grades in school, man, I was a solid C. And that was sufficient. I could play sports. That's all I needed was sufficient. My dad used to yell at me about my grades. Well, Dad, a C, that means average. I was happy with average. He wasn't, but I could have been straight A's, but I was content. C's were sufficient. As long as I got C's, I'd be in sports. I didn't need much money in my 20s. As long as I had money for gas and cigarettes, fast food, that was sufficient. I wasn't building a 401k or trying to start a business or buy a house. I was just living day to day, and all I needed was enough money to get through the day. It was sufficient life. It was adequate. My motto was, that's good enough. Until my early 30s, I lived a sufficient life. And then something changed. I decided that maybe I want a little more out of life other than just day to day. So I made a decision. I looked back on my life. I decided I wanted more. I decided I wanted to try and be some sort of success. I wanted to live a successful life, not a sufficient life. Success can come in many different endeavors, business and sports and entertainment. The world's success is defined by different metrics, money and power and fame and prestige and popularity. But success always takes hard work. Peyton Manning and LeBron James didn't sit on a couch wishing to be stars in their respective athletic endeavors. It took the weight room, conditioning, game films, practice. Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates didn't get rich by sitting on a couch and wishing they were rich. They put their nose to the grindstone and went to work. By the world's standards, all those people were successful. They were way more than sufficient. So I went to college. And I started myself on a career path. I went into management in my chosen field, Postal Service. And I remember a bumper sticker from the day. It said, "He who has the most toys wins." About a year later, I saw a bumper sticker that says, "He who has the most toys still dies.
Amen.
Sometimes we chase the toys and we forget that we can't take them with us. In the end, success, as the world measures, it's a hollow victory. It can leave you empty and only longing for more. The old saying that I climbed the ladder of success, and when I got to the top after many, many years, I found out my ladder was leaning on the wrong wall. In the end, we all die. Wealth and fame and power die with us. You never see a U-Haul trailer being pulled by a hearse. So you can choose a life that's sufficient. You can choose a life that's successful. Or you can choose a life that is significant, that makes a difference. This is where I stop using myself as an example. History will say whether my life was significant or not. There are much better examples out there. But Jeremiah 29:11, the prophet is speaking on behalf of God. And God says, I know the plans I've made for you, declares the Lord. Plans not to harm you, but to prosper you. Plans to give you a future and a hope. That's God's plan for each one of us. That's His plan. Unfortunately, we deviate from that plan frequently. But He has a master plan for each one of us to be successful and to live a significant life. Think of that. He has a particular plan for your life. And God cannot make a mistake. I hope we all agree on that. So it's fair to say His plan for your life is perfect. His plan for you is not sufficient. It's not necessarily successful. His plan for you is to have a significant life. A life that makes a difference. At some point in your life, you will realize, for such a time as this, I was placed upon the earth. That may be in your teenage years, it may be in your 60s. But for such a time as this, all that came before, this is the reason that I'm here. And I can look back on when I first entered ministry. Everything that came before led up to that. All my experiences, good and bad and otherwise, led up to that point in my life. I can tell you this, any life lived outside of God's plan is a wasted life. You took your life and watered it up in the bowl and threw it in the trash can. If you're outside of God's will, it ends up being meaningless. A significant life is one that makes a difference. It's one that matters in God's economy. It's one that impacts eternity. Unfortunately, God gave us free will. Many people will choose to live a life outside of God's will. That's me for many years. They'll live part or all of their life as merely a sufficient or successful life without ever making an impact on eternity or other people's lives. They never get the full realization of the life that God planned for them, a life that truly matters here and in the kingdom. Mordecai's words to Esther still ring today. Who knows but for such a time as this you were placed upon the earth. It's for you to decide what such a time as this is in your life. So I ask you, what time such as this were you placed upon the earth? As I said, there are better examples of a significant life than my own. The Apostle Paul and the disciples died as martyrs for the cause of Christ. Esther, at the risk of her own life, saved the Jews. Mother Teresa, no money, no home, no power, yet lives were changed. People came to know the love of God. She spent 60 years in poverty and died penniless. And right here in our own community, I can think of Scott Bibler and Jeff Shriver. Not rich, not famous, but who can deny their lives were significant to many others at school. Just in our school system alone, we have many significant individuals. Bill Leininger, Becky Smith, Crystal Heckerman, Michael Lukens, Cammie Lang, Shelley Engel, Mrs. Ehrlich, and others. Education is how they make a living. Significance is what they do. Intersecting with the lives of young people as they're growing up. Lisa Adams, think of the lives that she's impacted with her own. There are many examples in our life, at school and at church, of people whose lives make a difference. Your parents used to make all your decisions for you, but little by little, you start making your own. Soon you'll be making all of your own decisions. Soon you'll be an adult. You are entering adulthood as you leave high school. Going forward, your life will turn out to be a result of all the decisions you made along the way. Will you choose a sufficient life, which is a wasted life? Will you choose a successful life, which in the end is meaningless? Or would you rather choose a significant life, following God's plan for your life, which is, I remind you, perfect? Will there be a day in the future when others will look at your life and say, for such a time as this, they were placed upon the earth? Those I've asked to serve will please come.